Thanks for joining us. My name is Ibrahim Sani. We're taping this interview at the Kuala Lumpur Convention Centre. This is because we're attending the Hasanah Forum in conjunction with AVPN. We're talking about social impact and sustainability and ESG and many more. And throughout the 3 days, Astro AWANI is the official broadcaster at this conference, and of course we're looking at the kind of conversations that can be pulled out from this particular session. Of course, joining me on my left is Matthew Smith, the CEO of Fortify Rights. Let's start off with that. Can you tell me more about Fortify Rights?
Sure, Ibrahim. Thank you so much. So Fortify Rights, we're a human rights organization. We essentially do three things. So we're investigating human rights violations. We are engaging people who are in positions of power who can help change negative outcomes to positive outcomes. The third thing we do is what we call strengthening work. So we are strengthening community-based responses to human rights violations. This includes human rights education, it includes trainings, other types of things that our team can do for human rights defenders on the front lines. Our team is working in Myanmar, Thailand. We're here. We have a couple staff here in Malaysia. We're also in Bangladesh. And most of our team, in fact, all of our team comes from the countries where we're working. So I'm actually only one of two Americans on the team at Fortify Rights.
The issue of human rights has always been at the forefront when it comes to this part of the world, when it comes to, say, the Rohingya population. We're talking about other human rights violations in other ASEAN member countries, including that of Myanmar, for instance. Do you feel that you have your work cut out for you when it comes to trying to see and investigate and try to bring to light some of the human rights offenses that is being done in these many countries?
Most definitely. You know, you mentioned Myanmar, particularly the situation in Myanmar. You know, Fortify Rights was founded in Myanmar actually in 2013, and you know, we've been on the front lines of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity there. To its credit, actually, the Malaysian government has been outspoken within ASEAN about the need for justice and accountability for the human rights violations happening in Myanmar. But generally, you know, all countries struggle with human rights violations and human rites problems.
Including Malaysia, of course.
Including Malaysia, of course, yeah. Sure. Including my home country, the United States, of course.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. And so, so certainly the work is cut out for us on a global level. And you know, one thing we've been thinking more about is the disconnect between development work and human rights work. And we feel strongly that for development work to be successful and for human rights work to be successful, the two should really be combined. And so at Fortify Rights, we don't see divisions between these two areas. And I'm really grateful to be here in KL at AVPN to have those conversations with people here.
One would argue that economic growth and other development issues are actually contingent upon human rights. Others would argue that there are plenty of other countries or other examples that have achieved economic growth and economic success while disregarding human rights. Sure. Do you feel that that is the thinking that many of us hold in this part of the world?
Well, you know, I think there are market-based solutions to social problems, certainly. But market-based solutions and development solutions to social problems really only get us so far. So, for example, the market is not going to get the Rohingya Muslim population citizenship in Myanmar.
No, it won't.
Market-based solutions won't end human trafficking or hold human traffickers accountable. So there are these types of human rights violations that I think, unfortunately, many human rights violations really do need to be dealt with in a concerted, deliberate, explicit way. But again, there is this interplay with economic growth, with market-based solutions, and human rights promotion and protection.
One would argue also that if a country doesn't want to change, there seems to be little that other countries can actually encourage that particular country to adopt better human rights policies. The clearest example is ASEAN. With our non-intervention policy, there's only so much that countries within ASEAN can do to perhaps highlight the issue. ASEAN is still trying to find a way in terms of getting Myanmar to address its human rights issue. And of course, within the ASEAN countries, people can just call out hypocrisy. And of course, within our own countries and member states, there seems to be a lot that needs to be done within ourselves first. So there's the whole conversation of, even you can't get your act together, here you are telling me to do my things correctly. How do you see this whole conundrum of countries trying to assist other countries in achieving better human rights, but at the same time, they too are trying to address their own human rights issues.
Yeah, this is actually a big part of why the team at Fortify Rights comprises human rights defenders from the countries where we're working, and we believe strongly that the people who are closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. People outside can help, certainly, can support, but at the end of the day, sustainable, real change in the area of human rights does have to be homegrown. The case of Myanmar, for example, is particularly difficult within this region. But again, we've seen Malaysia, we've seen Indonesia in some ways break from that tradition of non-interference. I think a better way to put it is when it comes to mass atrocity crimes, when it comes to things like genocide and wholesale slaughters of communities and burning villages down, which are violations we're documenting in Myanmar, there's no place for non-intervention. Under international law, it is the responsibility of all governments to address what are referred to as international crimes, crimes that are so severe that they violate the conscience of mankind, of humankind rather.
Yeah.
So we are grateful to see more action from the upper echelons of the political officialdom here in Malaysia when it comes to atrocities in Myanmar. There are other issues. There are a number of refugees from Myanmar here in Malaysia who are struggling needlessly, and we would like to encourage the authorities to end refugee detention. No one should ever be imprisoned for their immigration status. And so these are types of things that I think are, they are achievable, winnable, solvable problems.
Even in the US, that there's this whole conversation of ICE should be dismantled. Do you feel that that kind of conversation needs to also happen globally, including the US?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we are seeing one of the defining human rights problems of our age are violations that refugees and migrants are facing, whether it's on the southern border of the United States, whether it's in KL, Thailand. We're seeing, entire families being imprisoned.
Of course, including children, especially children.
Exactly, yeah. And so these are people who have.
It's heartbreaking to see children behind bars. It just really is.
Precisely, and it's unconscionable and it's indefensible, really. And so it's one of those types of violations. Also, speaking of the economics, it costs money to imprison people, so it doesn't make any sense economically either. So this is, and we've seen the amazing things that refugee communities can do if they have the freedoms that they are entitled to.
One idea to explore is, of course, refugees need the means to assist themselves and take themselves to be a little bit more economically viable. Tech could be a solution for them, but access to capital for a refugee to do tech is near impossible, at least in Southeast Asia. We're looking at governments trying to appease their own, population and populace, but at the same time, they're trying to do the right thing, but it's hard to get the population to rally behind them. So there's a lot of challenges in terms of the government or authorities in ASEAN or in the US or many more around the world in trying to do the right thing. What would Fortify Rights argue in terms of trying to get governments and authorities to do the right thing? Is it the economic argument? Is that the quickest and most efficient way to get governments to solve the issues of human rights?
Well, it's part of it. States in the Asian states were involved in the drafting and negotiations of the major international human rights treaties that make up the international human rights framework. And so it's not something that was necessarily created in the West or like so. So I think acknowledging that collaborative history of creating this global international framework for human rights law, standards, norms, really came to be because of the contributions of UN member states within Asia as well as other parts of the world. So I think a big part of it is acknowledging that it already is in some ways part of the legal fabric. So it's not as though human rights defenders are asking for anything that stretches beyond what governments in this region have already committed to do. But there are economic arguments. As we discussed, detaining refugees doesn't make sense from any angle.
Yeah.
But really the core of it is that we all have rights as human beings. That includes refugees, migrants, that includes people that are fleeing from genocide and other atrocities. And so I think the main thrust of achieving human rights change really should be an acknowledgement of the rights that we all hold, the dignity that we all hold as human beings.
Let's talk a little bit more about the situation that is currently happening in Myanmar. Can you tell us, first-hand account, in terms of what the atrocities that are being done? We've heard reports, we've seen it, but what has Fortify Rights seen when it comes to human rights violations that is currently happening in Myanmar?
Well, even going back to 2012, for example, I personally was on the ground when villages were getting burned down in Western Myanmar.
This is the Rohingya.
Yeah, the Rohingya population. And then, of course, and our team members are on the front lines of these violations as well, collecting evidence, documenting the truth so that we can try to work to end and remedy those violations.
At the risk of their own personal safety.
Always, yeah. Unfortunately, that is the reality a lot of human rights defenders in the region are facing. Since the coup, February 1st, 2021 in Myanmar, the military took over. We've been seeing widespread and systematic attacks throughout the country against the civilian population. And this is not only horrible for Myanmar. Myanmar was on a very different trajectory before the coup. So it's not only horrible for Myanmar, but it's horrible for the entire region. And it's spilling over into Bangladesh, into Malaysia, Thailand, and other parts of this region. And so I think it is crucial not just for Myanmar's pro-democracy movement to win this battle that they're fighting. This is a life and death battle for more than 55 million people. But it's crucial for ASEAN to come together to support. And we have seen some unfortunate trends in, like the Thai authorities, for example, engaging the Myanmar military junta and not the pro-democratic forces in the country.
Giving them the legitimacy instead of the program.
Precisely,
people.
Yeah. And this is a military that's responsible for the worst crimes that could be committed: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. It's led by generals that really should be in The Hague facing criminal prosecution, which is also something we're working towards at Fortify Rights.
And of course, no matter how bleak the situation is, there seems to be a lot of cases or examples where human rights defenders do actually have or seize the day. We're looking at the Nuremberg trial, for instance, back in the 40s, that took place despite the Holocaust taking place. Do you feel that day of retribution is coming for those that are committing these atrocities?
I believe it deeply. I believe it deeply. I think the wheels of justice are very slow internationally. We know that. It could be improved, could be more efficient. But certainly, there are ongoing investigations now by the International Criminal Court into atrocities in Myanmar. Our organization actually just filed what's known as a universal jurisdiction complaint in Germany. Germany has a law that enables survivors of or victims of genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity to seek justice in Germany regardless of where the violations happened. It's one of the world's strongest universal jurisdiction laws. So we filed a complaint there with 16 survivors from all throughout Myanmar. There's a universal jurisdiction complaint around the Rohingya genocide happening in Argentina. There's a case happening at the International Court of Justice. So the wheels of justice are moving. And I think the more that governments support that accountability work, the better. And the Myanmar generals need to know that this type of behavior is not acceptable and that they will be held accountable for the atrocities that they're responsible for.
Who is funding Fortify Rights? How are you ensuring that your own financial sustainability is achieved in order for you to do the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, most of our funding comes from foundations or grant-making institutions, actually outside this region. And historically, a lot of Asian philanthropies have, in our experience at least, have kind of avoided explicitly supporting rights-based organizations.
Okay.
And I think that's actually it's a shift away from that history that I mentioned earlier of the way in which states in Asia have actually been involved in creating the human rights framework. So what we're hoping to see is more Asian philanthropies coming together to support the promotion and protection of human rights. And I think where we've seen some slower progress with the SDGs, with the development goals that the world is working towards, I think part of the reason for that has been this carve out of human rights. And so I think if we can bring human rights back into that fold of development to support that interplay, I think we'll see some dramatic changes, not only in this region, but internationally, because when advancements happen in one part of the world, other parts of the world take notice. It can spread in a very positive way. And so we're hoping to have some of those conversations here at AVPN.
I cannot imagine the majority of people around the world is opposing the upholding of human rights. However, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. How do you intend to bring that focus of conversation back into the frame to let people know that these violations are currently happening around the world, and this is very much essential to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis? How do you ensure that this continues to be at the center of the conversation for many countries and organizations right now?
You're absolutely correct, Ibrahim. It's a big issue. We have an amazing team at Fortify Rights of human rights defenders that are busy documenting and exposing violations. We're creating reports, we're creating films, social media content, doing what we can to reach populations not only within this region but outside of it as well. Speaking with governments, making sure that governments and people in positions of power have accurate and reliable information about human rights violations is a big part of what we do. And we take a great amount of time and energy to make sure that whatever it is we're focusing on is credible and is reliable. And so for us, that train keeps moving forward and certainly will. And as an organization, we are expanding as well. We're planning to be operational in Ukraine this year, and there's some discussions about expanding to other parts of the globe as well.
We'll go for one short break. When we come back, we'll continue on discussing human rights issues with Matthew Smith of Fortify Rights. We'll be right back after these messages. Thanks for staying on with us. I have with me Matthew Smith of Fortify Rights here at the corridors of the Hasana Forum in conjunction with AVPN. Matthew, let's talk about the speech that you're intending to give, I think tomorrow or the day after?
Today, actually.
Today, okay. Yeah. What would be some of the ideas that you can share with us? Very short, because we're going to make you late for your own speech.
Yeah, well, I intend to, I'm not sure exactly what I'll speak about, actually, but I do hope to touch on the importance of collaboration for positive human rights change. And I would like to, continue this conversation actually on the main stage here about the way in which states in this region have been important to the creation, development, negotiation, and adoption of human rights laws, standards. I think I will likely share some of the work that our team has been doing, some of the successes. We have part of our work helped create this region's largest human trafficking trial ever that resulted in holding dozens of human traffickers accountable in Thailand. We've helped get perpetrators of genocide to The Hague. Our team has changed more than 90 laws, policies, and practices so they're in line with international human rights standards since our founding in 2013. So we've had a lot of success, and we're excited about our approach, our model, and it's different slightly than sort of traditional international human rights groups. And so it certainly helps us get up in the morning and stay excited about creating positive change.
Will you be attending much of the conference over the next 3 days, yeah?
Absolutely. I'm excited to learn. I'm excited to meet people here. Already, I've only been here a few hours, and I've already had amazing conversations. So I'm really excited to be here, and it's a pleasure and an honor.
Fantastic. Final question. When it comes to what can be achieved in the near term, what would be some of the ideas that you can share with us on how people can actually help in this conversation moving forward?
Well, I think again, not dividing or separating what's traditionally known as development work from human rights work, and acknowledging that
it's like separate kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think combining these and acknowledging the interplay and encouraging homegrown philanthropies in Southeast Asia to get comfortable with supporting human rights work. And maintaining those collaborations with governments, with businesses, with philanthropies. For the success that we have had as an organization, it has really hinged on collaboration between governments, philanthropies, and human rights defenders throughout the region. And so we would like to see more of that. And again, I'm very interested to learn about the work that others are doing. Interested to meet new people, hear new voices.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for spending the time to speak with us. That was Matthew Smith, the co-founder and CEO of Fortify Rights. Do check them out. I'm sure there's a lot of collaboration or collaborative opportunities that you can do with them. Of course, do stay with us on Astro AWANI as we bring you more latest updates coming in from the Hasanah Forum in collaboration with AVPN. For now, my name is Ibrahim Sani. Catch you in the next one.